What's up guys? Today we're going to cover a different kind of video than we usually do. In the past, I made a previous video called how to power geyser and how to buster wolf like a pro. This is going to be something similar to that with Ken and Ryu's inputs. So we're going to cover it kind of similar in the same way. We're going to go over how to do all their inputs for both characters because some do have different inputs despite being echoes, quote unquote. And yeah, so let's get into this video. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go into our menu where it basically shows us our move list. This is the easiest way to figure this out. These are all of our moves for Ryu, and if you want to go over to the right, you can see all of Ken's. If you go further down, you get some of his command inputs, which are basically just directions followed by the attack button. He has 4 different ones you can choose from. You have Hadouken, I can't even, I'm not even going to try to say their names. Anyway, basically 4 different names you can choose from. And then it even tells you how you can activate them and make them stronger or faster by holding the button long or short. But what that means really is if you just tap A in the middle of the move, it's going to be very quick, or not very quick, it's going to be kind of lighter and not have so much knockback. Whereas if you hold it longer, it's going to have more lag behind it, but it's going to hit way stronger and sometimes even go faster depending on the move you're using. Okay, so now let's go back up to our inputs. Now, if you look at all 4 of these inputs for Ryu, you notice that there's a ton of arrows, and then a plus sign and an attack button. For the attack button, you can use A or B, but I suggest when practicing these, you use A, because if you use B, you're basically going to guarantee the special move, whereas if you use A, you can know it's going to happen through input command and not just by, doing a B over or up B, Also, you see all those arrows? For a lot of people, those arrows are very, very overwhelming, mainly because when they think about it, they think about like hitting 3 different directions and then attack button. But what we're going to do is we're going to make it a little bit simple. So if you see the Hadouken is down, diagonal down, and to the right, essentially that is just down to the right, which is a 1/4 circle to the right. Essentially, don't think of these as directions, think of these as a circle, because really the control stick can go in a complete circle because there's essentially 8 different directions you can choose from, but all of these directions will be facing either to the left, down, diagonal right, or right. Now Ken is a little bit more different than Ryu. Despite being an echo, Ken actually has one more command input and slightly different moves entirely, but that's okay, they still play very, very similar. They basically have the same type of setup for Hadouken, it's just quarter circle to the right, but Ken has a few other moves which we will cover in the video, and he lacks the ability to basically have the second form of the fireball, which is a red fireball. But out of every one of these moves, I would say despite the third input on Ryu having 5 arrows, I would say Shoryuken is probably the hardest because it's not just a circle, it is kind of like a Z pattern because you're going right, down, and diagonal. The cool thing is it doesn't matter if you have another input before the next input, so long as you reach that input. By that I mean if you go to the right and then you put the stick down by dragging it across the grooves of the controller to reach your down, despite you doing basically right, a diagonal, down, and then right, it's still going to count for right and down. So then all you have to do is drag the stick up a little bit more and you'll have your Shoryu, which is nice. So essentially, instead of doing right, down, and diagonal right, just do a Z pattern. That's the simplest way to do the Shoryuken. Now that you hopefully have a better understanding of what command inputs are and basically how to achieve them, let's go into our training. We're going to cover Ryu first, and then we'll cover Ken right afterwards. I think Ryu of the 2 is much simpler to play. Ken's inputs are a little bit more difficult, but I do find Ken to be more fun to play for me. So the first input we're going to cover is just the Hadouken. I'll show you what I mean by strongholds and weak holds. This is just me tapping B without any input. Just so you guys know, I have stale moves off for this example. One more time. It's 8.4, just tapping B. If I were to hold B, it's actually a little bit stronger. And this is regular again, just tapping. Very slow. But if you hold it, it's faster. So holding it for longer actually does more damage and increases its speed. Good to know. But if we do our input, which will be a quarter circle facing your opponent, whether your opponent is in front of you or to the right of you or to the left of you, Ryu will always face the direction. So you're going to do quarter circle towards your opponent. It doesn't matter what side, or it does matter what side you want basically, just so long as you face your opponent when you do the quarter circle input. So we're going to do quarter circle to the right, and we're going to get our Hadouken, which should be a little bit faster and stronger. And there it is, coming out at 12. Now if you just tap it, you'll still get it, but it is much slower, and it does a little bit less damage. Moving right along, we're going to go into our second input for Ryu, which is different from Ken's, but it's going to be a 180 circle, meaning you're going to start from the left, or away from the opponent, and drag the stick all the way to the right side from the bottom of your control stick. So basically it's going to go left, bottom, diagonal right, and right. So a 180, so half a circle essentially. So here's what it's going to look like if you know you do it right. You'll know you won't do it right if it's not red. That's the easiest way to tell basically. That's it. And the cool thing is, with a lot of these inputs, most of them can be buffered for certain moves. For instance, Ken and Ryu can buffer their moves in the middle of a down smash, so you can actually down smash your opponent and then do an input and get a pretty nice combo off with some pretty decent damage. Here's what it's going to look like. That was just the Hadouken, and there's the second stage of it. Easy 35%. It's very, very hard to get out of too, because once you hit the first hit, you can essentially go into any one of your combos, including your Shoryu and your spin kick, which I just can't think of the name of right now. But speaking of that spin kick, it is very similar to your Hadouken in a way, because of its inputs. It's just going to be down and then away from the opponent. So pretty much a 1/4 circle away from the opponent, which is very simple. It's just the same as the Hadouken, just opposite. So here's what it's going to look like if you don't do it. This is just tapping. It's going to send your opponent into the air, do 13. If you hold it, it's going to do a little bit more, have a little bit more knockback. But if you do manage to do the input, it's going to look like this. It's going to have a little bit more damage, a little bit more knockback, and it's actually going to kill a whole lot sooner because of the knockback increase. And the final thing we're going to discuss for Ryu is his Shoryuken, which is his uppercut. As I said before, think of it like a Z pattern. If you just normally press B up, you're still going to get a good, Shoryuken. If you hold it, you're going to get more damage and more knockback. It's still nice, but the input will kill so much quicker. So the easiest way to do this, I think, is just to perform the Z pattern. If you want, I guess you could try to do the directions, but it's just so much harder that way. Here's what it's going to look like. Way more damage, way more knockback, way more effective. We've switched over to Ken for the second portion of the video, and as with the first, we're going to go to our moves list. Now the good news is, if you can successfully do Ryu's inputs, then you can do 4/5 of Ken's, which is awesome. So if you already know how to do Ryu's, you're set for Ken. Now there is one difference though, or a couple actually, I think, but the first one we're going to talk about is the 4th input. So Ken actually has 5 inputs, not 4 like Ryu, and the 4th input is the difference. It's the Nada Oroshi Gira. It's just right, diagonal right, down, so it's just quarter circle down. So to the right, quarter circle down, an attack button. And it's just a double kick. It's really simple. Another difference that Ken has is that despite him having very similar inputs as Ryu, some of those inputs will lead you to different results, as you'll see here in a sec. So let's go with Ken. Now the good news is Hadouken is still just quarter circle and then attack. Ooh, there we go. Now the bad news is Ken does not have a second version of that fireball. You will not find a red fireball, because the same input that Ryu would normally do for that red fireball is actually a completely different move now, but it's a very good move. So it's this kind of like double kick looking thing. And why that's good is it can do crazy damage, but it's also good for snapping shield. Usually if your opponent can shield a down smash or just your normal A, that kick will follow up and snap shield quite easily. Let's talk about his quarter circle back, which is essentially the same as Ryu's as well, except he gets multiple hits. If you don't use the input, you still get good damage. If you hold it, the input lasts way longer and you get more damage. The Shoryuken is also very similar to Ryu's in the way that you perform it, but it has considerable more knockback and damage, so I'll show you that here. That's just the Z. If you choose not to use the input, you can still get a pretty powerful move, it's just not going to do as much damage. And last is that Naragoroshi, which is just essentially an axe kick. This move I consider in the same placement as the double kick we did from earlier. It's just a little bit good for doing combos because it keeps your opponent very close by. Bad news is it doesn't have crazy range on it, so when you do it, just be careful. So here's what it's gonna look like. Oh, that's not it. That's not it either. There we go. Just an axe kick though. But essentially, for me, I find that Ken's a little bit better just because of the crazy amounts of damage he can pull off with his combos. That being said, Ryu can combo very well too, but I feel like Ken just has more tools to work with. That's why I think he's a little bit better. But anyway guys, that does it for the video. I hope you guys were able to learn something, and if you did, feel free to let me know in the comments. I'm always super excited to read that. Like, share, and subscribe more, and thank you guys so much for watching.